Okay.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here. It is Tuesday, February 1st, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. And I now call to order the workshop of the City of College Place City Council. Lisa, will you please take the roll call and verify quorum?
Yes. Councilmember Jessup. I don't see. Councilmember Cleveland.
Present.
Councilmember Peterson.
Present.
Councilmember Espinoza.
Present.
Councilmember Selby. Don't see. Councilmember Sherman.
Present.
Councilmember Boyle.
Present.
Okay, we do have a quorum. We also have with us City Administrator Rizzatello, City Attorney Ree Colwell, Finance Director Brian Carlton, Deputy Finance Director Deshree Schmick, Public Works, nope, not Public Works Director, Police Chief Troy Tamaris, and Officer Brandon Rhodes, who will be sworn in tonight, Fire Chief David Winter, Community Development Director John Rickard, and Building Official Scott Hall, and myself, of course, Mayor Norma. And we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you. All right, well then let's get moving. We do have several workshop items tonight, although no actions will be taken. So first we have the oath of the office for College Place Police Department for Officer Brandon Rhodes. Chief Tamaris, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Mayor, Council, thank you so very much. Very exciting night for us at the College Place Police Department. We get to swear in a new officer, Brandon Rhodes. What makes this extra special tonight is Brandon grew up in our community. So for him to come back to our community, to serve this community, is a pretty exciting thing. Brandon has nearly 9 years of law enforcement experience. So he is a lateral officer coming to us from the west side of the state, and we couldn't be more excited. He has hit the ground running, and I'm very excited to get this thing on the road here. So here we go. Brandon, if you'd raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name.
I, Brandon Rhodes,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
or affirm
or affirm
that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of my office
discharge the duties of my office
as prescribed by law
as prescribed by law
and to the best of my ability.
and to the best of my ability,
Will support the Constitution
will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
and laws of the state of Washington
and laws of the state of Washington
and ordinances
and ordinances
of the city of College
of the
Place
city of College Place
as a peace officer,
as a peace officer,
to which position
to which position
I have been appointed.
I have been appointed.
Congratulations, my friend.
Thank you, Chief.
Hey, Mayor, I'm gonna have the, yes, clap, clap. I'm gonna have Brandon's wife come up here and pin on his badge.
Wonderful.
That was Brandon, want to say anything?
Yeah, Council Mayor, I'm really thankful that I was given the opportunity by the chief to get a job here. I'm happy to be back to the area and really excited to work for the city of College Place.
Well, welcome and congratulations, Officer Rhodes.
Thank you.
And we'll have you sign here.
I want to note real quick that both council members Jessup and Selby have joined us.
All right, Mayor, we'll turn everything back over to you, Council. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Now put him to work, Chief Tamaris.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on then. Let's go to the next item, which is a presentation on the council chambers AV design and 60% plans. And Mr. Rickard and Mr. Lubin will present on that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
So we have, so far with the council AV design, we are at roughly 60%. And tonight I have Ed Lubin, who's the lead with Meyer Architecture, and Ajinka Patel, who is with, I'm sorry, Ajinka, with Convergent Technologies on the AV side of everything. And so we're going to, Ed, did you want to start off with anything introductory wise, or should we go ahead and jump right into the AV stuff, and then might you take over on the other side?
You could probably, I'll just say, as the council members are probably aware, the focus of this phase one of this project is the AV, the technology upgrade. So with that, we'll let Ajinka maybe and John work the images and talk about that. I'll mute for a sec.
Yeah, if Lisa, if you could allow Ajinka to share his screen so he can show
He
the
should have that ability.
Great.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ed and John. I'm Ajinka Patil from Convergent Technologies Design Group, and I'm working along with Ed and his team to develop the AV design, or low voltage, as we call it, low voltage systems for this project. So just want to confirm you guys can see my screen.
Yes.
Yep. So these are the progress plans that we currently have. We are calling it kind of the 60% set. So there's still some back and forth and review process remaining until we finalize the AV design. But today I just kind of like to walk you guys through the technology upgrades we are planning for this building, and just kind of give you a brief overview without getting too technical, but still all the key features and elements that we are planning for this space. So with that being said, I'll kind of flip through some sheets. Initial drawings, what you see are kind of what we call infrastructure details. So these are just how the devices and the cabling and all the stuff would be mounted. What we have here, kind of giving you a big picture, is this is the basement of the council chambers. And as far as technology upgrades in the basement, we are planning for new telecom data cabling in the office space, in the storage spaces, in the training rooms. And also we are planning to upgrade the existing telecom room. So the reason to update the telecom room is to support all the new cabling, the up to the latest standard category 6A cabling we are planning for this project. So this is the telecom room and a few details with regards to that. For this project, we are planning for adding new telecom cabling to all of the offices, surrounding spaces across the council chambers that would support cabling for computers and phones. So, and also we are planning for wireless.
Mr.
could you-
Patel, Mr. Patel,
Yes,
can we
ma'am.
just take a, we have a council member who has a question. Can we just interrupt real quick?
Yeah, sure. No worries.
Can you zoom in a little more? I realize that we won't be able to see. Thank you, because I couldn't read anything. So thank you.
No, good point. I was trying to keep it big and then get into individual spaces, but that's fine too. So as a part of technology upgrade, as I was saying, we're planning for new cabling in all the office spaces that would support your phone and computer systems. And we are also planning to upgrade the Wi-Fi capabilities within the space by planning for new wireless access points. So you guys will have better wireless service. The key focus for the AV technology upgrade is obviously the council chambers itself. That is a part of this, as we call it, phase one. And then there is also AV system planned for the conference room behind, which is, I believe, a part of phase two. So that being said, kind of getting into the council chambers itself. So working along with the architects and coordinating the different architectural and MEP coordination for AV, what we are planning for this space is one large primary viewing surface, or we call it as a video wall in the front. That would be the main display where you'd be showing your presentations, your camera feeds, or any other slides that you guys want to share. And we are also planning for 2 supplementary displays on the side on which you can have either different presentation, different content, or again, share the same thing that you're sharing on the big wall. But these side displays kind of help people sitting in different areas to have a better viewing angle. So these are the 3 main display surfaces within the space. The front wall, dimension wise, it is approximately 8 feet by 5 feet. So it's actually 4 displays tiled together to form a large viewing surface. And the side ones are 85-inch diagonal flat panel 4K displays. For displays, we are also planning a display within the lobby outside, and that is actually on this sheet. So this lobby over here, as soon as you exit, we are planning for a display outside, which would act as either an overflow display if there's a large gathering and people are waiting outside in the lobby. So any feed, any presentation happening within the council chambers can also be shown on this exterior display. So that is another viewing surface we are planning for the council chambers. From an audio perspective, we are planning for each of the council members' seat to get its own dedicated microphone. It would be a Congress delegate microphone chairman delegate system. So you would have the ability to control your own mic, have the ability to, and also have a small viewing surface so that any presentation shown on the large screen will also be shown in front of you. So each seat will have its own small little display, or we are calling it as an individual display. The clerk seat will have its own dedicated inputs and multiple monitors to kind of run the different sessions that happen within this chambers. And that seat will also get its own set of control panel and inputs as well from an AV perspective. In the middle, for someone standing over there, we are planning for an integrated AV lectern. So that lectern will again have its own microphones and input source capability for that lectern as well, for someone to either present or talk standing at the podium. That podium we are planning to be portable in nature. So if there's a scenario where you don't need that podium to be there, that can be moved out of the way, and we'll plan the infrastructure so that the cables can be just disconnected and you'll have a floor box with a cover on it. From audio speech reinforcement or audio reinforcement perspective, we are planning for ceiling loudspeakers and also front wall loudspeakers, so that whenever if there's someone speaking, the speech can be amplified so that everyone within the space can hear everyone clearly. And also if there's a presentation with some sort of audio playback, that can be heard through those speakers as well. For the AV system, we are planning on integrating a small AV rack, which will kind of house all the centralized AV equipment so that it's out of sight, out of the way, and it will have its own door, so that once the system is completely installed, you would not have to, day-to-day worry about it. Only when it needs some sort of service or updates, that's when you'll be going within the AV rack. For cameras, we are planning for, I believe, 3 cameras, at least 3 cameras in this space, so that we have multiple angles and different views for each of the council members. And we are planning to integrate video tracking technology within the AV system, so that the camera kind of automatically focuses on someone who's speaking. So that is something also we are planning in our design. What you're seeing over here is just some, as we develop these design, we do something called as sightline analysis. So we make sure that the displays are mounted at the right height. No one coming in front of the display or someone sitting at the back does not get interrupted, by someone sitting or standing in front of the display. And also we ensure that the displays are mounted at the right height so that nobody has to strain too much to either look too up high or something. So we keep all those things in mind as well. The ability for, or the main functionality that the AV system within the space will allow would be the ability to present, the ability to wirelessly present as well. So someone with an iPad, laptop, or a phone should be able to, obviously with authorization, connect to the AV system within this space. You would also have the ability to stream and record any of your sessions. So that was something while we were doing the AV design user group meetings. These were a few pointers given to us to work the AV design around. So the AV system would be functional and capable of doing streaming and recording as well. Any questions up till this far, as far as the council chambers?
Any questions? Oh, Ms. Selby.
This sounds great. The council seats, I've seen them sometimes rearranged for different meetings. Will these be fastened in place, or will they still be able to be rearranged?
That one's probably more for me. The dais is intended to be built in place. This was a uniquely shaped. Well, the amount of space we had and the amount of seats we needed to fit, we couldn't really find store-bought item that was going to work, frankly, and have proper exiting spaces, room behind the seats and all that. As you can see, it already takes up quite a bit of room. So no, these are not designed to be moved, the dais or the semi-roundish seating. But there are portable chairs out on the main floor. So chairs and tables could be set up there for workshops.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think that's fine. I just wanted to know which way it was. And as far as the individual displays, will we be able to like zoom in and out of those ourselves so we can kind of zoom in on one piece or something?
That is correct. You should be able to do that. I think so. During the user group, we had the discussion about the displays. Right now, the individual displays would be controlled by the clerk. So any content being shown on this displays is controlled by the clerk, but you should have the ability to individually zoom in or zoom out of any documents that you might be seeing. So you should have that ability.
Okay. Thank you. And are the audio that we're getting, is that going to be compatible with the hearing aid things where they can like tune in somehow on their hearing aids?
That is a great point. So yes, we are planning for an assisted listening system for this space. So anybody with a hearing deficiency should be, we are currently planning for an IR-based assisted listening system. So you will have receivers distributed if and when those are required, and that person can just use that receiver to engage with whatever the audio is being transmitted in the space.
That's good. I don't know much about it, but I would like if we could find out a little bit more about working with hearing aids, because I know there is a way that, if you already have the hearing aids, the IR things sometimes don't work that well, and certain audio systems work well with them and certain don't, but that's as much as I know. So I just want to make sure that as much as possible, anybody can have access, equal access.
That's a great feedback. I know there are these decoil systems that kind of work inherently with hearing aids. So if that is a requirement, we can definitely integrate the assisted listening system to be compatible with those. So yeah.
And I don't want to double the cost of it if that's what it takes or something, but I do think it's something that we need to look into. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Peterson?
Yeah, it sounds like a really sophisticated system. And so I have a kind of a basic question. Many times we go into executive sessions and have to kill the output. And then many times we have to communicate out that we need another additional allotment of time. So obviously that's being built in or thought about as far as a quick kill switch or back and forth, rather seamless communication in those types of scenarios.
Yeah, absolutely. So the way we are designing the system, it is really flexible. So we are planning for two main control panels or touch panel control surfaces, one at the clerk's desk and one, as you see here behind. So they will have integrated presets of either just a single push button turning on of the system. If you want a general mute all the microphones or kill all the video feeds, you can have those dedicated buttons that you can just with a single press of a click, your AV can be cut out from the exterior world, or if you want to mute them internally, you can do that as well.
Thank you.
And the way we are writing the spec or what we are expecting from the AV contractor is once this contract documents go out, we have an AV integrator on board. Creating that touch panel user interface in our spec, we have written that it needs to be an iterative process with the end users or the AV users for this council chambers. So you will have multiple chances to review how the look and feel of that touch panel is, so that it's not something just that the contractor provides. It is what you guys actually want. So yeah. One thing I kind of missed was in the lobby itself, we are also planning for a sort of press feed. So that would be physical connections on the wall, that in case there's a scenario where there's an OB-WAN or a broadcast type of requirement, so that a feed from within the council chambers is required outside. So we are at least planning for that infrastructure so that you can get the video and audio feed just from the lobby and nobody has to come all the way within the room running their long cables. So that is something that we are planning for as well. And the lobby would also have ceiling mounted speakers for, again, that overflow audio. So in case there's a large gathering or there's a large session and there are people standing in the lobby, they'd still be able to hear what is going on inside. And the way we are designing it is it is on its own separate zone. So you turn that on only if it's a requirement. And if you just want to keep the session within the chambers, that can be done as well. And the lobby speakers can be segregated. Any other questions with regards to the AV in the council chambers? I wanted to quickly touch base on the conference room as well and what we are planning for that.
I do not see any other hands raised, so thank you.
I think I had one question. How will the system integrate in with Zoom and our board docs?
With Zoom, it should seamlessly integrate. So we are planning for all the AV feeds to be, there's something called as an AV bridge that kind of integrates all the HDMI, the SD, the line level or mic level audios into a single USB feed. So that would then connect to one of your PCs that would be within the AV rack. And then that PC would be the computer that either the clerk controls or runs the Zoom meetings on. So it would just detect it as a microphone and a camera, and you'd still be able to pick and select which camera goes to the Zoom session.
Great.
So for the conference room 120, as I earlier said, this is a part of phase 2, but we are planning for a really straightforward and easy to use conference system with a single large format display up in front, along with a wall mounted camera in the front and ceiling mounted loudspeakers and ceiling mounted microphone, so that you can have your regular Zoom meetings or sessions over there. And also the ability to, if you just want to share an Excel file or pull up a presentation, you can seamlessly do it through the connections on the table itself, either physically connecting it, or the system will also be wirelessly capable. So if somebody has a phone or an iPad or a laptop, without physically plugging in, they should still be able to wirelessly present to the display. So you can have that collaborative session in there. If multiple people want to connect at the same time, they're still able to. So that was kind of in a quick brief overview of all the things AV or technology wise we are planning for the space. What you're seeing are something called as reflected ceiling plans, just showing the different devices we are planning in the ceilings. The circles are the wireless coverage right now we are planning for. We are also planning to provide cabling infrastructure for new cameras, security cameras in this building. So that is something also we are capturing as a part of this technology upgrade for this project.
And those security cameras would be primarily on the exterior and in the lobby, but not in the individual offices.
Glad about that.
Any additional questions for Ajinka before we turn this over? Oh, Melody has her hand up. I'm sorry.
Sorry. So will it be a problem if, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Right now we have our Chromebooks that we have so that we can look at maybe other stuff that's on board docs rather than what's being displayed right now. Will those be able to still be a part of the system and be plugged in, or is that going to be, would that like overload it?
I would still think you would be able to use your own Chromebooks with board docs, if I'm correct. We are just not planning for any individual inputs at the station. So if you want to share from your laptop, we are not planning for that. Unless that is a requirement, you guys can let us know and we can include that as well, the ability to.
I don't see the need to share, but I
Right.
do sometimes like to go back to, maybe a couple meetings back, or, what did we do last year? And, I don't expect Lisa to pull that up and show everybody. I'm just trying to see if I can answer some of my own questions or remind myself. So my second question, and this may be irrelevant in this day and age, but do we have the ability then to bring in like TV? Like if there's breaking news or documentaries or I don't know, whatever, that sometimes we want to bring in TV to conference rooms, etc. Does that all just come over the internet now? So as long as we have internet, we have that?
I think so. That's the main plan. If you guys have any IPTV subscription, we can definitely pull that up. If you want to plan for a dedicated coaxial TV tuner like a Verizon box or something, we can plan for that as well. John, do you have any feedback on what you guys want to do for this?
Currently we don't have any, we don't have any cable or anything like that. I mean, so we'll look into that and see if it's something that we want to make available.
Yeah, there are two ways we can go, either through a coaxial connection, like a typical TV tuner in both these spaces, we can plan for that. Or if you have more like an IPTV base, so we can just pull up live news over the internet and on the computer and show it on the display. So that can be done as well. But great suggestion. We'll make a note of that. And as I said, we are still in 60%. So we'll definitely circle back with John and his team and try to include that in the design.
Thank you. I know that, I mean, the last time I really dealt with detailed wiring was a long time ago. So just tell me if I'm like completely outdated.
No, we still see those TV tuners. A lot of buildings still have physical coaxial connections for TVs. So yeah, that's a great suggestion. We'll make a note of it.
Okay, well, thank you, Ajinka. I think, Ed, if we want to go ahead and turn it over to you. Do you
So
want?
one thing about I am not very technologically inclined, and so I don't know how to share a screen. So I sent those drawings that way. I'm hoping maybe I just have well, just a few.
I can share my screen.
If you, this is why Ajinka is designing that part and his team.
You
So
just need to tell me what you want the audience to see. So
yeah, that's fine. It's a lot of this you already saw on Ajinka's screen. I just real quick overview for phase one, and that's what we have. We have two drawings that we're sharing tonight that are part of phase one. There's a whole bunch of other drawings that are details and mostly boring for most people, but phase one is we're going to put new carpet and paint, kind of patch some holes in the ceiling because we're going to be redoing the lighting. You might go to the ceiling where you're at right now. That'll be good. This is just a ceiling plan for the lobby and the council chambers. And we're going to have the little round circles at the back half of the council chambers, and then in the lobby, in the darker circles, not the light ones by the restroom. Those are going to be kind of long tube pendant type lights, but they light not just down, but they light from the sides also. The whole thing is kind of a lens. And then for the council, then that's this track lighting that mounts on the ceiling with spotlights, LED lights that kind of shine towards the council, the people at the dais, the council members and others. And then the other thing that's not mounted here, that we're anticipating having little flexible tube, just little flex lights. There's probably a better name for them on the dais desks around for each of the desk council members and others, so they can bend it and shine on paperwork if they need some extra light for reading or who knows what. So they'll have that
task lighting at each council chambers.
Yeah, but task lighting, and we'll have probably a similar task light. It's really just it can be mounted in place, or in this case, anyhow, probably one at the podium, also lecturing there. So that's all. That's what's going on lighting wise. The only significant architectural change maybe that's going on is, again, we're doing new finishes. We'll talk about the lobby in a sec, but over there where the AV closet, room 129, you might, I'm sure, are familiar. That's used to be where people used to visit their family members in jail or whatever, or maybe attorneys would visit. I don't know which side of the wall the attorneys are on, but but one thing that John and Scott and others have asked that we're going us to do is we're also going to tear out a portion of where that door is that separates the jail from the corridor 128 and 123, I guess, on this drawing, for lack of we still have we didn't get it cleaned up. We still call out storage 127. Well, that's gone. We'll be removing that where the prisoner would sit, or the inmate, whatever the proper terminology is. And for now, we're just going to cut this concrete block on the wall. We're just going to cut it at a clean line and paint and seal and make it look, halfway decent, pretty good. Phase 2 will get into a lot more work there, but so that's about it. We're cutting in a new door for the AV closet, filling in where the old window and the old door were, and opening up that hall, since we're already messing with that wall anyhow. It seemed like a good time to open up that wall, and that's kind of it. In the lobby, the big thing there is there'll be those at each of the windows, the counters, I guess. We're going to we're going to build a new countertop that's meets handicap height requirement, which is 2 foot 10 inches, a maximum above the ground, and keeping, for the most part, the windows. We have to modify one of them, but that's kind of what's going on there. And there'll be new paint because of that too. We're going to kind of clean up the lobby a bit too, a little bit. We're not doing anything with the flooring, but there's some trim, kind of fake wood trim we've been asked to remove and repair the wall behind that. And John, I don't know if you're aware of this yet, but we're going to, at elevation number 8, down in the bottom right corner, we're going to have to build a little stem wall on top of the entryway, because we're planning on doing it, and it'll be about a foot high. Yeah, you can see it right there, because of ductwork as part of the mechanical upgrades. And so we were going to, there was a hole that needed to be patched. There's some, we're going to patch that hole and clean up the entryway just a little bit. It's otherwise mostly just paint and patch, carpet, and a little bit of remodel on phase 1 architecturally. Not too much. One of the big projects is that's included in phase 1, but we don't know if the funding will be there. So we're including it as an alternate. It'll be in the bid, is replacing the HVAC for the whole building. We just don't know that the money will be there, and audio and technology is the #1 priority. So we're designing it for phase 1, half anticipating that we'll get a price, but have to set it aside until phase 2. And then the second drawing that John pulled up is phase 2, and you already saw hints of it before. Taking that old, kind of filling out one corner of the building, essentially.
Mr.
And,
Lubin?
yeah.
Councilmember Peterson has a question.
Ask away.
Oh, no, it kind of, general, back to the seating for the council. You've already stated that it's kind of permanently fixed there, and I just kind of wanted to revisit that quickly. Maybe this is more of a question for Lisa or others also. Have there been times when we've needed to clear that area out for some other activity, or and I understand, I don't have I can go either way on this one. I really don't, however it turns out, but I understand them being custom built and whatnot, but is there a need for this to be able to be slid against the walls for some other activity and maybe people that have rearranged the room could maybe comment on that?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that, and if Lisa wants to add to it or anybody else, that'd be great. But we've had discussions about this. We really prefer a fixed seating area, primarily because of the the technology that's going to go into it, and it's rather labor intense to set that equipment up every single time anybody goes into that room and moves things around to their own desire. So it's a staffing issue in order to get that room prepared for a public meeting. But also it's hard on the equipment every time you're unplugging stuff. In the past, we've found that, if microphones and speakers aren't in the right spots, we end up with feedback. And this is going to be at such a different level of sophistication in terms of the equipment that we're using. We really do not want to be moving this stuff weekly, bi-weekly. But we do feel that with the ability to pull out all of the chairs and stack those up and still have some, we'll probably end up getting some tables that are more portable than what we currently have, so that we can utilize this space as a conference room. We're going to need to have that capability in the interim until we are able to move into phase 2 and get a conference room built. So that's really the desire from at a staff level.
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad, John, that you took that one too, because we're just taking our directions from the staff.
Yeah.
And
It looks like Melody has a question again.
I'm not sure if this is a question, but more of sort of a clarifying comment for my own benefit. It seems to me, in the past, I've had some groups that actually were able to use the council chambers because they were like, nonprofit, just public groups. But it seems to me that by doing this technology upgrade to this level of technology, essentially we're saying that these chambers should be limited to public meetings and type of conference room run by the staff only. And we shouldn't be like, letting other people use it like sometimes the fire training rooms get used, etc. Does that make sense? Seem right?
I think that's a discussion we'll have to have, whether or not we probably won't want the general public utilizing any of the AV equipment, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we wouldn't make the space available for meetings and, but we can talk about that as an overall use of the facility.
Yeah, I mean, I would counter. I don't think it would do that at all, because when I worked for City of Beaverton, Oregon, they did this sort of technology enhancement, and I would actually argue over time, once people figured out what it was capable of and staff, that it was an enhancement for both groups. And when I worked at Beaverton, we had groups actually meet on the dais, believe it or not, over there. So I actually don't think it'll impair that at all. In fact, I would argue with phase 1, phase 2, it'll enhance it, because not only will you have council chambers, but then we'll actually finally have a formal council room. Because I will tell you, when we have development meetings and other meetings, I will just say it looks bizarre that we have to be moving around tables and stuff, and that we don't have like a formal like conference room. It's weird. So
I can see that. That makes sense. I guess I'm still back in the everything's so breakable stage, but I see what you're saying. That makes sense.
one nice thing, though, is, again, there's a good chunk of the room that is pretty flexible for, like I think John mentioned and others alluded to, tables can be set up for staff meetings and such. Again, ignoring the back half of the building, which right now is a garage, and for breakout. And so those chairs are, they're portable and can be arranged all sorts of ways for groups and such.
So Ed, would you like to go ahead and just kind of give a little overview of phase 2, maybe starting
Yeah.
back here
That's kind of why we included that, just because part of phase one, ironically or interestingly, was that we were asked to go ahead and develop the layout for phase two. This way, our mechanical design and, as Ajinka alluded to earlier, their technology design can be designed to accommodate what's coming down the road, even if. So yeah, so you can see we're more or less. I don't know if maybe I should have had plans side by side, but we're taking the jail cells out and cleaning up that hallway a little bit, and we're able to add in 3 offices, and I guess one was there before. 1, 2, I think 125 was sort of a 2-person office. If I'm not.
Yeah, 125 kind of has, it's an L shape, and it'll
Yeah.
become more rectangular. And then these 2 offices really take up the most of the 3-cell jail cells that we have.
Yeah, and then new
Oh.
administrator's office and mayor's office in the conference room. We had to. There'll be a little bit of trick down that back storage room behind the council chambers, but that's the hallway, that 117 that connects both sides of the buildings, and we have to have that circulation from a fire safety standpoint. Can't have a dead end corridor, and so that's kind of what happens. The break room's on the made a little larger.
So if you all remember, council, there's a storage area behind the council room right now. So that becomes a corridor, and it's going to enable staff. Right now, we go through this door and cut through the council room when we want to interact with the other side of City Hall without, going into the public realm. And so that's going to really enable us to function better, having that corridor. But it does eliminate Mike's office. So we haven't figured out what we're going to do with Mike yet, but I think we all want to keep him. So actually we planned an office for him back here. Of course, also we don't, with all of the growth that we've had at staff level here at City Hall, we don't have a mayor's office really at this point. And so that we would also gain a mayor's office and modify the break room to create this corridor. So that's kind of the general layout.
Yeah. The break room is a little larger now too. And the mayor and the administrator's offices are large enough to have many conferences in too.
Yes.
So
yeah,
more flexibility.
We felt that was important for both the mayor and the administrator to have conference table in their space. And I think, Ed, do we have some?
We do.
Exterior renderings. There we go.
And I think we have, at least on one of the drawings, I thought now and future. That's more or less now. I guess there we go. Yeah, that does it. We got those 3D phase 2, and then above it is 3D phase 1.
So there's existing.
Yeah.
There would be the addition.
And those big old things sticking out that are new that you might wonder, they're right. Yeah, those are part of the new HVAC system. We're actually, it's not, we don't have it drawn in here yet, but we'll be creating a little island for those to sit in, a little off of the sidewalk. But there really wasn't a good way to set units on the roof. It's just not the kind of roof that lends itself for that. And so we picked a spot that at least isn't at the main entry and isn't on the street. So and I figured it's actually across from the trash container area, which our mechanical guys, I always a place to put the uglies. They try to figure out why I call them the uglies, but anyhow, we have different perspectives. But,
okay,
yes.
any last minute questions about phase 2?
Doesn't appear so. Very
right, well,
thorough.
thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ajinka, if you're still with us. Ajinka's back east in New York, so he's probably getting ready for bed.
Is that officially end our part? And
I
Yes,
think so.
thank you very much.
okay, all right, guys. Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, let's move on to the tax increment financing, also known as TIF, by Ms. Colwell, and Mr. Rizzatello will be presenting.
Okay, I'll introduce this and then turn it over to Ree. So up until the last legislative session, we were the only state out of all rest of the states that did not have tax increment financing as economic development tool. After much lobbying for many years, the legislature finally adopted some semblance of tax increment financing, which allows the city to get ahead on the bandwagon and help facilitate development via public infrastructure investments, betting via studies and so forth on potential future projects and so forth. So it is legal now. We can do it. We're on the frontier of this because it's so new. The only other ones that are doing it right now is like Pasco, and I believe there's one other one on the west side. So with that, I will turn it over to Ree about the legal ramifications and the like.
Not used to presenting. This is my first workshop, so I'm excited. Lisa, let me know if someone raised their hand. I'm going to plow through this considering the time frame we have. Basically, what a TIF is the ability for the city to designate a geographical area, and the city finances or borrows money to do infrastructure development in that particular area, with the thought that the property values in that area will increase, and the city has the ability to capture all of the increased tax from that increased valuation. So the tax remains the same, but the city gets to collect all of that. So I'll probably the easiest way to is this slide here. So if we look at the vertical axis, that is the taxes that the city would normally receive if we just went about our merry way. And in the, I guess it's orange sherbet color, is the existing tax base, what we can rely on as far as our assessed value and what we're going to receive for our revenue. So if the city designates an increment area, it's called an IA, and invests in the infrastructure, you can see with the light colored, the increase in the value of the assessed value of the property goes up. What is a little bit different is the city gets to capture all of that. So that increased value does not go to other taxing districts. It goes solely just to the city, and it has to be used to pay for that public improvement. We can't just do whatever we want with it. If we end up earning more money than it cost us for the infrastructure, that money goes back. My first thought was, well, why wouldn't the port be upset or EMS be upset that they're not getting this tax? But it shows at the end of the life of the TIF district, we have that increase in assessed value that's beneficial to all people receiving taxes. And the basic, before we get into what I'm going to have Mike talk about possible areas, the big test is the but-for test. If we as College Place just went about our merry way it wouldn't be, we wouldn't be able to predict any development in any particular areas. There isn't an incentive for someone to develop. But if we invest, then we know development is going to come. So it's a way for the city to show, hey, if we don't spend this money, if we don't borrow this money and spend it in infrastructure, the assessed value is not going to go up. But if we borrow money and we invest in the infrastructure, the assessed value is going to go up, and we're going to recapture that. So I kind of look at it like I took out a loan to go to law school. If I were to try to pay back that loan without having gone to law school, it might be impossible, if not, or difficult, if not impossible. But since I went to law school and graduated, I can earn more money now, so I can pay back that student loan. And everyone wins, especially the city of College Park. Thank you, Norma, for laughing. Okay, so any questions so far? I'm not an expert in taxing, but this is the basic concept. And like Mike said, states across the United States do this. We've done it before in Washington State.
Councilmember Espinosa has a question.
All right, hopefully I can answer.
Yes, I have a question. So based on this model,
Mhm.
You would only increase the assessed value of the zones impacted by the improvements
That's
alone,
correct.
or- So you would only pick the vicinity of, let's say you build a brand new road or a new access to a neighborhood that is going to be impacted, and you think the property values are going to go up because of this new improvement. Only the assessed value of those homes in that vicinity are going to go up. That's what you're saying.
That's what the model says. Now, it's possible that the assessed value in areas around may go up, but the tax rate remains the same for everyone. So, Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about, did I answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah, there isn't any law that says anything outside the increment area has to stay the same. So that will be just the regular assessed value that the county assessor does every year. So here are the areas that Mike has provided.
Councilmember Selby.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Just to follow up on Councilmember Espinosa's question,
Mhm.
in the TIF area, is there some sort of special assessment that happens there? Or is it just the county assessor does the same thing, only we project that the values will go up because of this improvement?
It is a projection. You asked the question that I asked as well when I was learning about this. Do we call it?
All brilliant minds all think alike.
Is the value going to go up because we just call it an increment area? And I could see my legal mind was thinking we're going to get in a fight with the assessor over the value of this. No, the assessor just does. I think it's her evaluation, just like she normally does. But the assessed value is going to go up when there's infrastructure put in place, and then hopefully development that will flow from that infrastructure will increase the value.
So I think I get this, just to make it absolutely clear. So like we scraped together the money to do that south side sewer line, but we just had to find that money and pay for it. And this would allow us to borrow money to do that infrastructure because we would have a space of time where all of the extra taxes come to pay that back.
That's right. That's correct.
Yep.
And it's a
Thank you.
win in the end for the other taxing districts. Yeah. All right, Mike.
Yeah. So there's several areas this can be used in. There are some very interesting caveats with what was adopted here in the state for tax increment financing compared to other states. One is, as it stands right now, each jurisdiction can only do up to 2 TIF districts, and then there's some essentially square mileage tests as well. Luckily, square mileage part we don't have to worry about because we're a very dense, small community. So that part is good. The 2 of them, though, what that means as it stands right now is that we have to get the boundaries correct, because once they're established and the 2 are called out for, we have to live with it, and that is what it is, at least until they're paid off. There's multiple ways to slice and dice this, but here's some ideas. First of all, and this is the one that likely I'm recommending Economic Development Commission and you all that we consider, is what I would call the Stone Creek Downtown Hybrid TIF. And the general concept there would be to encompass that land across from the high school, Meadowbrook area, and then up College Avenue, and do several public improvements. The first one would be to really get the Stone Creek thing rocking and rolling, as well as for the new school to enable access back there. We do need the east-west road. That has been called out in the capital facility plan in earlier renderings of that area, so help out with that. Also, Southwest Majanier, while we are getting MPO money for the engineering and then some federal earmark money for construction, I believe that earmark money is not going to be the whole amount, because keep in mind, the Congress only ended up passing 33% of what was in that infrastructure bill. So even though they haven't told us what we're getting yet, I think one could extrapolate out that it'll likely be 33%. So that. Also, wastewater treatment plant improvements, there could be some consideration there. Also, and this is why the idea with going up to College Avenue is a sound one. Shared parking. Now, I've made some comments about this in years past, but a lot of the small businesses and retailers and folks that want to develop up in the downtown area of College Avenue, a common concern is, as it stands right now, we have parking requirements on each individual development in College Avenue, but the way the lots are shaped, it gets very tricky to essentially facilitate the parking, the business, everything. And I think that's causing our issue with at least seeing the reinvestment being a lot slower than I thought it would be after cars. So the general concept would be to build shared parking lots. Our blocks are so large around here. A lot of these city blocks, the interior of them are a separate parcel that's basically vacant ground. So I believe those would be prime to have shared parking lots, and then we could waive that parking requirement. And I think that would definitely facilitate significant investment privately in College Avenue. There are other ones that could potentially work. Myra and Rose, I mean, we have the Whitman Drive site, we have the vacant site over the Google MLE family owns up at Rose and Damson. Martin Airfield, you have that which Corliss and Tarragon own, and that can facilitate some development. I think depending on what pops in the future, either one of those, the Myra Rose or Martin Airfield, could be a potential for the second one. I believe the urgency at the moment where that either and or test is definitely met is this Stone Creek downtown one, because I believe with those various projects that I have outlined that you would see significant investment and definitely the increase in the amount being collected because of that investment. So those are just my 2 cents. The nearest one to us right now is Piasco. They are in the process of getting a TIF going up around the Darigold site, and they have a industrial park off of like 395 where there's going to be a casino and some other stuff that they're trying to finance with it, but they're the closest one. I think this would be ideal for Stone Creek, Meadowbrook downtown part.
Thanks, Mike. Any questions? Yes.
Councilmember Jessup?
Hi, Mike. So if I understand correctly, you had mentioned this earlier before, that in a TIF area, the life of the loan would simply be until it's paid off.
Yeah.
And then so every summer they reassess the value, right? And then so that tax that's collected is just within that year of assessed value.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of continuous, if you will, revolving.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions right now? Let's see. We'll plow through. So because this is such a new thing for most people, we're kind of on the cutting edge, and I'm tapping into as much resources as I can. But the gist is, if we want to keep TIF and continue to have TIF, is not to just hand it out to a developer that we're going to finance this development, but to actually pass the but-for test. If we don't invest, the development wouldn't come. So here's the eligible infrastructure improvements. It's pretty wide ranging, and you should have all that in your material. Affordable housing is in there. We have to pass an ordinance. We can't have two areas overlapping, like Mike said. There's a monetary limit, which we're well within. We just need to be cautious about what we designate, because we can't change that. And once we hopefully receive the money to pay for it, then we can absolve the area. And if we want to start another one, do that. So a project analysis is the big thing. It's basically our roadmap to show what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And we have to assess impacts on affordable housing, business, school, fire, which we provide that. So there's some outreach required. The recommendation is that we at least notify taxing districts that are in the city, so we can kind of have their buy-in. Let's see. So in working with Brian, most likely it will be general obligation bonds, or what will be used to finance. So there is a risk if we decide to finance infrastructure and we don't get development, we are still on the hook for that debt. So that's where we'll need Brian's expertise. Our debt limit, this will go towards our debt limit that's set. Let's see. So I think we can partner with private developer. That's what Pasco's doing with Darigold. They have a development agreement with them. So that's something that we can consider. I think more of like Martin Airfield in the future, that we might be able to consider that. The initial cost, this is asking around 10,000 to 75,000 consultation. The problem with this is right now, there really isn't anyone out there that you can call on the phone and say, hey, can you do a TIF analysis for us? And so Mike and I and Brian and John are working to see if we can't do a lot of that in-house, which I trust Brian and John and Mike. I listed out what needs to be in the project analysis. Once we develop this goes to the state treasurer. They have 90 days to review it. They don't actually have any authority to make us do one thing or another, but I'm guessing they'll have expertise. And let's see, so here's an example. of what a project analysis might entail if we were looking at putting in multifamily retail space. We would pay for the infrastructure and then the development would come. All right, I think that's it. I plowed through it. It's a lot of information, but the nitty gritty is it's a tool to raise revenue.
And I would just add that back in my prior lives in Illinois, when I worked at Council of Government, I was a tax increment finance administrator there, and then in the City of Beaver, then ran their urban renewal program, which in Oregon they call it something different, but it's the same thing. It's urban renewal there, but here it's in most everywhere else it's tax increment financing. So we'll be looking at doing this study in-house just because expertise, because this is so new. The state doesn't really, there isn't really the consulting breadth that's developed yet here in this state.
All right, thank you for that. You made it sound, I'm gonna say you made it sound so easy, but I gotta admit, I've been spending months watching YouTube videos on how TIF works. But Councilmember Espinosa has his hand raised, and then Councilmember Selby.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a question for Mike and Ria. So the way that I see it, this is a way to accelerate growth for our community through projects and infrastructure development, correct?
Correct.
So here's a question. If we were not to enact this financial model and we were to do it the slow way, could we still, over the years, but a much lower space, still to make these developments and improvements without going through this model of acquiring debt on the front end for our community?
I mean, you could, I mean, the Southwest Sewer is a great example of that, because we did put in the loan, the grant applications, got a ton of grant money and so forth. My issue with that is, frankly, that was timing and luck. Because I mean, when we put in Southwest Sewer, we actually wiped out the entirety of USDA's grant allocation for the state of Washington, because I had other city managers calling me to tell me their 2 cents on that one, but it was timing and luck. The issue is, I don't think we're going to keep hitting the strokes of luck on that. And my concern is that, especially with this TIF that I'm proposing, if we don't do it, I have a strong suspicion that it's going to stall out what we're trying to do over there. And that has several ramifications, because then you're having depressed tax collection, whereas you could have had development. And then the bigger issue is the whole urban growth boundary area discussion that I have pontificated about the past couple of years. And the issue there is, as long as we have these vacant pieces of land, we aren't going to get a greater area to grow into. And unless we fill this up, I think that's a big portion of why you're seeing the elevated rents, the housing costs, everything else. So I think to try to get some affordable housing up in here, and I'm not saying like low income, I'm saying in general, somewhat like a reasonable person can afford, which trust me, I've looked myself and wow, around here, that it can facilitate that. So that's truly the issue we're in. Yeah, we could wait, but I think we'll be shooting ourselves in the foot doing that. And that's just my 2 cents.
And I'll follow up with what Mike said. You know, we're competing with other jurisdictions for development. And if someone looks at our cost of living, our cost of housing, and says, well, you know, we're a service industry and we're not going to have a worker pool, it's going to cost us X number. Well, if we have the infrastructure there, it might be an incentive for them to pick us over another jurisdiction.
Thank you both.
Councilmember Selby, and then Councilmember Peterson.
I basically have, I think, a question and a comment. My question is it allowed to like coordinate with another jurisdiction, so you would have two right together. I'm thinking of Myra Road between 12th and 125, and how we've been told over and over that if we could get rid of that center block so that people could turn left, we could get some businesses, some restaurants and stuff in there. You know, I don't know how well that would connect to other areas that you are thinking about, but is
Oh,
that
Melody,
allowable?
you don't know how that's the bane of Mike's existence. That
It's a bane of my existence too.
Yeah.
Maybe you and I could rent a jackhammer.
No comment, and I've thought it, but as far as Myra Road, very good point. The thing is, it talks about jurisdiction singularly, so I do have concern about a joint one. Now, Walla, which I would not be surprised if it, like if we did one in Myra, I would put money on it. They would probably do an identical one across the street from Myra, so that way there's similar infrastructure coming. I think that definitely would occur. The reason I'm not suggesting Myra first, at least on its own accord, is that that Stone Creek downtown one really has a multitude of impacts and stuff. And over years, there's been multiple discussions with developers and investors of, hey, if X, Y, and Z existed, I'd be here. So there's a lot of evidence there. Now with Myra and Martin Airfield, I think there has to be the reason I am proposing not to act on those immediately is because ultimately Martin Airfield and Myra, because I was playing around with mapping, seeing if I could connect the dots. You connect the dots and make a unified district for Martin Airfield and Myra Road. And Martin is too far from downtown and Stone Creek to do it that way. So ultimately for that second one, we're going to have to make a value judgment about either Martin Airfield or Myra. And there isn't enough stuff solidified on either of those yet, or at least in my opinion, it warranted essentially squandering the second one on one of them. I think we need something concrete. But on the Stone Creek downtown one, I will say that if we don't take a forward action on that, that it will stymie it, and it's going to have that multiplier effect on the UGA issue for years to come.
I definitely agree on that one. And then my comment was just a thought that we might reach, since we're some of the first people doing it, we might reach out to, I think John can tell us if it's Central Washington or Eastern Washington University that has a good city planning graduate program. And we had people from WSU, look at some things before, and we might be able to get some interns or something that could do a lot of the legwork. And then we would also at the same time be growing our own Washington State experts. And especially if we got the professors involved to kind of oversee, I think you get, I would love to offer some of our students, but I don't think we have the right kind.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Brian, Mike, John and I are going to participate in a webinar from MRSC on Thursday, I think.
Yeah.
So, and I've been communicating with the MRSC gentleman, and so he's just as new as we are. So we got good minds on this. Yeah.
Councilmember Peterson.
Yeah, just a real quick comment. I think talking about jurisdictions and whatnot, I think this is something that I know Mike and I have talked about this maybe in the distant past, but we have a state next to us that if there was a competition prior to this for a development, we would be flat-footed, as far as their ability to put in sewers, sidewalks, streets, or whatever, just across the state line. And so this is something probably to keep in mind, to keep our, the debt limit at a point where the powder dry, so to speak. But it's probably only a matter of time where there'll be some I would say this puts us on an equal footing, perhaps. Maybe that's going too far, but that's kind of where it looks like as far as between the states.
One comment to that I think would be important to point out is that the Sykes project on the south side of Milton Freewater, all the infrastructure out there was actually financed by the Oregon version of tax increment financing. So Milton Freewater at the time, they created an urban renewal district and that paid for all of that. So without that, that would not have come there.
Councilmember Jessup.
Thank you. And Melanie, I was going to tell you, that makes me more excited to be here, having similar educator minds there. That's the same kind of aspect. It's awesome. Mike, I have not spent months looking at YouTube about TIF. That's a very good idea, Mayor. So forgive my ignorance, but this is a little bit of a naive question. When it comes to TIF, so you're essentially projecting how the cost of the infrastructure project, and then you're collecting tax along the way, which to pay for it. Naively thinking, is it always just a straight shot of cost, or is there some rollover? Because I assume, but please forgive me, if it costs more than what we can collect because of assessed value, then of course we're on the hook for that. But what if we have more assessed value greater than what we're projecting the cost of the project would be? Is there ever rollover?
There can be rollover actually where the estimate versus what was pulled in, and what was pulled in was so great that in essence you have money left over. Now typically at the time the jurisdiction that enables it has essentially two choices. Essentially you can just empty out the money in the TIF, and then all the additional increment at that point goes to all the partner jurisdictions. Or the other option is essentially, in essence, allowing a rollover of the TIF district. And if there's other improvements that would essentially allow a greater gain of tax revenue, then do that, continue a district out for some time. So in Oregon, if you study City of Beaverton and like the Round development, they call that the Beaverton Urban Renewal Area. That's essentially what they did. The first phase funded everything around the Round, and then that was so successful, they have now essentially doubled down, and then now they're funding infrastructure, help with a performing arts center, all sorts of other stuff to enable mixed use development. So we can do that, and rollover can and does happen.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments regarding TIF?
This is Councilmember Selby, and I just want to say that, you know, as a civil engineer, I've seen over and over again that infrastructure drives development. And in fact, in some times and places, I have argued against infrastructure improvements because it's going to drive development, and because we didn't want development right there. So I'm a firm believer in this, as long as we are intelligent about what infrastructure we do. And I have every confidence in our staff that we will be. So I'm, yay, I guess is what I want to say.
I do also want to thank Mike and Brian, because they have put many, many, many hours into this to get this far. So thank you all for that.
Yeah, and if any of the new council members want to talk about the ability of the city to raise revenue and that type of stuff and how limited it is, just talk to Brian.
Well, all right.
Thank
Well,
you.
very good, Ree. That's the way to pass it on. Well, okay, so now we're going to move on. And speaking of Brian, so we're going to move on to the assumption of private Autumn Meadows HOA infrastructure. And that's going to be Mr. Rizzatello, Ms. Colwell, and Mr. Carlton.
Hey, thank you, Mayor. So I will introduce this again, and then we could go through the various portions. So This subject item is a little bit odd because most cities do not have to deal with this. However, we do. And what I mean by that is that through the 1980s and 1990s, this city had a habit where some subdivisions were letting, where developers at the time were basically able to put in substandard infrastructure if that infrastructure, meaning roads, water, sewer, stuff that you would commonly denote as like a municipal problem, that the homeowners association would own and maintain it. And the thing is the way this infrastructure was installed in a multitude of subdivisions, it is coming near the end of its useful life. And that becomes a very interesting issue because there's quite a few areas that aren't really aware they are a homeowners association. And then when I've been through the neighborhoods going, hey, why aren't you fixing this? And it's like, hey, we don't own it. It's the HOA issue. Or just over a year's assessments and the like were not raised enough to help fund this. And then plus there's just some HOAs that become defunct, and then who takes care of it, right? So the first HOA that approached us about this issue was Autumn Meadows. And Autumn Meadows is an area over by around like Falbo Drive, and then the various cul-de-sacs over there, although Newgate and Scenic View proper are city streets, but Falbo and the cul-de-sacs and even the park property out there are not. And there was an interest in how do you unwind this thing from the HOA having to figure out how to get the money, get the infrastructure up to city standard, and then move forward. So as you all may recall, and this was a couple of years ago, about 4 years ago already, Robert Gordon and myself worked on a code, Assumption of Private Infrastructure Code, Chapter 3.22. And what this thing allows is that if the HOA, the board decides that they no longer want to either exist or own the assets, they can essentially deposit some money at the city. We will find a third-party engineer to do an infrastructure assessment. And what the assessment will say is, what is the cost to correct the infrastructure? What is the remaining value of said infrastructure? And then is there any assets there to defray what is owed? So whether it be property, money, both, and then essentially what's owed. Now, when you get past the study stage, then the HOA has a decision to make of if they agree with everything and do they want to move forward. Then the HOA members, they file essentially petitions with the city, and then it essentially moves up to where it's a council deliberation. Do you want to allow this or not? So in the case of Autumn Meadows, they did the infrastructure assessment study, and what it was found is that the depreciated value of the infrastructure in that subdivision is a little north of 123,000. The cost to correct is 324,000. But then when you take the depreciated value, as well as the fact that they have assets, in fact, park property, and that park property that went through our park board reviewing it and seeing its congruence with our park master plan, and the fact that it adjoins the 12th Street parklet that the Sherwood Trust Group has been working on. So park board, they voted to recommend the council that getting that park property would be a good idea. So with that, that means that leaves a value of the HOA to pay the city of around $200,000. Now, reaching that value can be done several ways. If they have enough money in their HOA bank account, they can hand that over to the city, or they can do a hybrid of where they give some of the money and then the remainder is financed via a local improvement district. And a local improvement district, which is why we required the petitions in essence, that is essentially where they're taxing themselves for whatever that differential is for the cost to correct. And then that makes the city whole. And then it's getting them up to the city standard. And then we take over the operation and maintenance of those roads once they're corrected. And that includes like the snow plowing and you know, everything else. Now, this whole initiative is a little bit of a canary in the coal mine because again, at least to this level, we're one of the only cities where we like put ourselves in this position historically. So there are other areas that, mark my words, will reach a similar predicament. I listed them out below. So you have villages of Garrison Creek. They're a very active HOA. I don't have evidence that that would happen soon, but it's just be aware, please be aware of it. Also, the west half of Sunset Villa, half of it has public streets. The other half is private, believe it or not. Whitman PUD, which that is the streets off of 3rd Street. So basically like Alpine, California, those areas that like lack the typical curb and gutter and so forth. And then there's a lot of like random cul-de-sacs and like dead end roads. So off of Rose Street, Tulip Lane, Sedona, Cottonwood, Beechwood, there's a block of ash between Rose and C. And then there's a couple of cul-de-sacs off of B Street. So Schnabel, Lorella, Ruby, and then down off of 8th, you have Vintage and Tuscany Way, which is private as well. So all that to say is this is a way to orderly unwind this mess because what my big concern is, and I think it should be everyone's concern, is in this case we have a HOA that realizes they have issues getting the attendance and being able to maintain all this stuff, and there's a way for a city to get the money and bring them in a city standard and have an orderly unwinding. If we don't do this with these areas, what happens then? Then you essentially have decrepit infrastructure, and then the home values and the values of the neighboring area would deteriorate if that infrastructure is left to deteriorate, if there's no HOA left to answer for it. So therefore, I mean, the staff recommendation on this is to allow this and pursue this. The thing there is I'm just being very upfront. It's a canary in the coal mine thing because a lot of cities don't really have this issue. So even when we wrote that assumption of private infrastructure code, there was a lot of analysis to figure out how to do this and what is the appropriate legal way to unwind something and be fair and square about it to everyone. So that is our attempt to do that. Brian, Rhea, if you have any additions to that.
I think you covered it really well.
All right, let's go through council members then for questions. Because Councilmember Peterson has his hand up already though.
So Mike, it's interesting. It's like, I mean, we don't know what's below the surface, do we, in some of these areas? Are the sewer systems and whatnot, they had to meet standards when they were put in, or because like $400,000 will buy about 6.5 feet of a street with sewer, it's like,
Yeah. So I mean, with this, it's merely the cost to correct and fixing those roads that aren't meeting the condition. Now, as far as what was built to spec and what isn't, that very much varies development to development around that time period. And that is why for the HOAs that are wanting to investigate this concept, they have to essentially pay to have that third-party engineer do the assessment, because then there can't be any accusations that we're fibbing or anything. It's a third-party assessment. They have to ground truth what is in the ground and what is the value of what's left, what's the value of any assets like park to give, and then what is that true cost to correct, because that study, when you look at it, has an engineer's stamp on it. So
yeah. Okay. Thanks, Mike.
And we can also charge staff time. So I'm keeping track of all my time working on this. And we can hold them to the standards we have now for what we want it to be.
Yeah, and just so everyone's aware, when there's that gap of capital expenditure that we have to commit, those projects have to move forward. We either fund that through current reserves, or we take a bond out to fund that differential. And then what happens is the community, over a period of time, pays us back up to 20 years. They can pay that bond amount back depending on how it's structured. So that differential, the city's not out of the money, but they do have to either fund it or take a bond out to pay for those infrastructure improvements. And then we set up the local improvement district that requires them to pay us back over a set period of time.
Or we make it a TIF.
Well, there's no increment though.
Yeah.
I'll give you a bad time.
The TIF will solve everything.
All right, I'm going to go through other council members to see if there's any additional questions or comments. And we'll start with you, Councilmember Jessup.
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Mr. Cleveland?
No questions, but Mike, thank you for such forward thinking and trying to be proactive in addressing problems that may be coming down the road soon.
Mr. Espinosa?
No questions.
Ms. Selby?
No questions. I'm glad we're going to have a trial case, because there's going to be a lot of this coming up in the next few years.
Agreed. Ms. Sherman?
This is my neighborhood. I can't be part of the conversation.
Ask questions. Okay, Ms. Boyle?
No questions. Thanks, Mike.
All right, it looks like we're done with that. Any further comment, Mike?
Yeah, I will just add this will be coming to you for formal action the next council meeting, because all the petitions and everything have been filed. So I mean, we're ready to get going on this, and yeah.
All right, thank you. Okay, next is the Southwest Davis from 4th to 3rd Street parking change request. And Mr. Rizzatello, you will present on that as well.
Thank you. And this is just for your review to take a look at it. And then if you have any further questions, let me know. And this will go for council action, not the next meeting, but later in the month. Because if you all remember, we do put out like formal notices and stuff now just because of the previous DCO road debacle. So with Southwest Davis, this was a request from the university where they wanted to bring back some diagonal parking on Southwest Davis. Historically, and if you look at old aerial maps, it actually was there like back in the day, and then it was taken out. So we had an engineer write an assessment for it about would they recommend it or not. JUB did provide a memo to that effect, where basically it said because of limited speeds and limited risk of accidents, they thought it would work. So they thought it was acceptable. You can also see the police chief's opinion as well about this. So that is pretty much it in a nutshell. I will say the university did come to us about this right around the time we were having the talks about the 4 Bikes project, because continuing the cycle track does take out parking on one side of Southwest 4th, and that project is ongoing right now with contractors and the like. So I think they view this like as a way to essentially get some parking back. The one thing that if this does move through that I would caveat it with, and I have advised them of this, is, you know, as it stands right now with Davis, this may be acceptable, but let's say hypothetically, you know, as we've been talking TIF district, we have development to west and to south, and that Davis matures into more of a collector where there's higher traffic volumes. Don't be expecting that Davis is like frozen and set in stone, because external conditions of the city may necessitate it to do something else. This was recommended from the Utilities and Transportation Advisory Commission a while ago. And pretty much that is the general gist of this, putting back some parking where it was at. basically on one side of the Southwest Davis from 4th to a little bit north of 3rd near their one entry. And that was what they requested. And then the engineer memo was provided.
All right, any questions or comments from any of the council members? Please raise your hand. Councilmember Cleveland and then Councilmember Selby.
Yeah, I don't recall when it was some years ago. I remember some discussion of the diagonal parking along 4th Street in front of the Winter Education Complex. And I vaguely remember something that was said that was something to the effect that diagonal parking is less safe. And I was just reading the police chief's opinion. He was suggesting that it's more safe in addition to being more efficient. Could we maybe get some data on just, if there is, a significant difference in terms of safety? Because when you're parallel parked, you check your mirror and you drive straight out. Whereas when you are diagonally parked, you have to back into traffic. So if we could get some data on that, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
Michael, the parking in front of WEC was that suicide parking that was straight in, not angled. And that's what they were saying was bad.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Selby.
I think this was the UTAC meeting just before I started, because I was looking back at my calendar, and but at the first UTAC meeting that I was at, we had presented that study of pedestrian accidents. And right at the end of that road is our biggest, or Davis and, what is it, Davis and
Whitman.
Yeah. Well, but also Davis and 4th there was a pretty big hotspot right there of pedestrian accident. And so I was a little concerned that we would put in angle parking at a place where we have kids walking around. So, and when we talked about it, then the transportation engineer, who since has left to go off to another job that worked on it, recommended back in angle parking as much safer, which it is, because you can drive straight out. And it's usually more, people are paying more attention when they park. And parallel parking it's more when they park that it's dangerous, because, it's people like, well, I gave up, I don't parallel park, but there are people that'll make the 20-point turn, and so my concerns are, I think we need to be sure to have a nice long setback from the intersections with 3rd and 4th. Actually with, yellow curb there, because yeah, it's just dangerous. And then, well, even if it's not that dangerous, the idea that that's our biggest trouble spot and then we're going to put more parking there seems a little wrong. Secondly, I really would like to see the university, and I am biased because I have a job there, but they are not enforcing at all their parking thing that they did a few years ago. And they, made all the fancy signs and everybody had to have a sticker, and that is not being enforced at all. And if they actually enforced that, there would be much less problem with parking, because we have people who live in the dorm who drive to class, drive to their next class, drive to the WEC, and yeah. So anyway, those are the sort of conditions that I would bring up in talking to the university. And I would like, along with Michael's question, I would also kind of like to look into the back in parking. The city of Olympia put some in a few years ago, and everybody was all first, and then everybody was like, oh, this actually is kind of good. So they might be a place to check with.
Yeah, we definitely can. And I would also concur about the sentiment of the university not following the parking signage and so forth. There's enough new members on this body where you may not be aware of this, but geez, it's probably going back 3 years. There wasn't signage around the university parking lots, and we were getting a number of complaints from residents that live adjacent to the university. And there was an item workshop probably back in 2017 or 18 about actually doing a parking district where residents would get like a free tab or a permit or something to put on the windshield, and everyone else would have to pay somehow. The university requested we step back from that because they were going to do the parking lot assignments. So therefore, we essentially held still on that. I've communicated to them that definitely my cursory review and residents indicating concerns about it is it does not appear to be followed. Blue zones is actually helping us do a parking assessment in that area. So that's going to provide us some data, but I think it is going to come to a point and I've essentially mentioned this to university where if they don't start enforcing the signage that they put up, we may have to re-engage in that conversation about the parking district. Not that I'm super thrilled about doing it because there is like a lot of legwork on the city side. But I mean, geez, if there's not going to be ownership taken, what choice we have? Because the people living adjacent, I mean, they have a right to park by a place they live at too. So.
Okay, Councilmember Cleveland.
So my wife's parents live off of Evans, kind of down that way, and she has a animal she goes to feed each day, and so we drive that stretch of Davis pretty frequently. One thing to consider is that, especially on the east side of the WEC there, the Winter Education Complex, there's a lot of students that go back and forth. So I guess one concern I have is that if we put more parking, especially diagonal parking, that's pretty compact there, we'd have more students kind of walking across the street right there. A lot of them don't bother to go to the sidewalks, and so sometimes you see people just kind of stepping out all of a sudden. So I think that's, again, one, even if it is, back end parking, it would be good to see some studies on, safety for that area. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's move on then. Thank you, Mike. Next is the ambulance utility rate assessment, and this will be led by Chief Winter and Mr. Carlton.
I'll start off, and if Chief Winter has anything to add, he can add in at any time. I'll just share my screen and bring up I'll bring up my presentation here. So we've, can everybody see that?
Yep.
Yes.
As usual, could you zoom in a little? Thank you.
I can see it.
Doesn't need to be quite that much, but.
All right, let me do so.
Thank you. Right about there is perfect.
So this has come to council a number of times, starting back, I believe, in 2018. And for the new council members, I'll go through this briefly. Everybody's seen this numerous times, but we began the ambulance service back in 2019. Our current funding is a combination of mechanisms through our EMS property tax levy, through the GEMT cost to recover our ambulance charges, and then a majority of it happens through contribution from the general fund. Back in 2018, FSC Group did an analysis of our service and recently, with our significant increase of 20% in our call volumes, there isn't just the resources there to keep up with the ambulance service. As a result, what was recommended was that we pay for that extra amount, which in total is, just shy of $500,000, to supplement the current staffing levels by adding 4 firefighters, EMT employees to the staff. That will allow us to have more than one EMT person on each shift and allow us to cover the additional call volume. Now, how do we fund that? That either we fund it out of our current reserves, which currently isn't enough to support a $500,000 increase in costs on a yearly basis. Another alternative is to have an ambulance utility, and the state allows us to operate a ambulance utility. And why would we create this? We increase consistency of our service, we maintain the current level of service to the public, and we establish a reliable source to fund ambulance costs. We brought this to you before and went through different scenario recommendations, and I'll just jump ahead to those. This is a little sheet showing where we're at on our funding of our fire and EMS. And you can see that we do operate definitely at a deficit. It costs the community to operate that service. You can see across the board how we're operating at a deficit, and that is funded by current expense dollars, which you might be aware of. We're funded through property taxes, we're sales tax, tax, etc. And you can see the total number of calls, how they've increased over the years, up to 1,825 calls in 2021, so a 20% increase. So how are we going to fund that and give relief to the fire and EMS departments? Well, we looked at a number of different scenarios of trying to, how we're going to charge this and what the rate would be for charging. One things that we stressed and we wanted to make sure is that we wanted to have a consistent process in charging, and one that's relatively simple. It's fair across all customer groups, and only charges, we stated only charges customers with physical buildings. So things like parking lots and parks, etc., wouldn't be charged. The methods that we looked at were, and this was done by a number of different entities within the state, how they charge their ambulance utility. And one was to charge based on the number of utility accounts. There's some advantages to that and disadvantages, and I'll talk about each of those in the different scenarios. In that scenario, it's easy to calculate. We know how many utility accounts they are. It's readily available from our information in Springbrook, and it's similar method that other cities used. And when Walla Walla was considering implementing a ambulance utility, this is the method that they were going to use. Some of the disadvantages of that method: it does not account for properties with multiple units, for example, apartments, commercial units, etc. It has the highest rate for billing customer, and it's not necessarily associated to who consumes the service. The second method that we looked at was to charge it based on some sort of equivalent unit, and a single family. We're looking at ERU, the single family residence, as a comparable basis, and we would segment that down into those different components you see: residential, multifamily, commercial, church, school, and public buildings. Some advantages of that method: it's consistent application across all the customer categories. It's based on an ERU as opposed to a number of accounts, and it's a more equitable rate determination. Some of the disadvantage It's, again, not necessarily associated to who consumes the service, and it's a little more difficult to calculate. The third method that we analyzed was based on the incident count. That directly charges the customers who incur the use. For us, the disadvantage is hard to calculate, and calculations need to be changed more frequently, maybe monthly, yearly, quarterly. We hadn't looked at that breakdown at that level, but definitely it skews the charges to, you know, different incident groups and may not correlate over the years to who incurs the service. There is a note there that the staff did recommend number 2. So in our calculations of a equivalent residential unit, this is how our customer categories are broken down currently in Springbrook. So you can see there how this would be based. A residential unit is in fact that is one unit, they get one charge. We also have multi-family residential, and that's based on the number of units. So a fourplex would be charged 4 units. And then as far as the remaining categories, we would determine the equivalent square footage of those businesses based on an average square footage that represents an ERU. So if a single family residence based on national standards, the average residential unit is 1,985 square feet. So we would take the square footage of, say, a commercial building was 10,000 square feet. We would divide that by 1,985, and that would give us an equivalent residential unit. And we would charge based on that. And I do have an example where we'll show how that calculates out. You can see the assumptions that we would take into this scenario. So what we did do is, prior to the last introduction of this, we looked at different methods, but we didn't have it for sure what an equivalent unit would be. So what we did do is we took all 120 of our commercial accounts, including schools, churches, senior living, and we went on the Walla Walla County's assessor's website and determined what square footage of their buildings are on the county assessor site, and determined an ERU based on what information is available on the assessor site. We do have there is some exemptions that of course would take place, and those exemptions would be according to our existing city policy. So senior discount, et cetera. And also there's exemptions for residents on Medicaid. So any of the senior living, we would have to identify what percentage of their facility is related to Medicaid, because we cannot legally charge based on Medicare units. We would review and adjust the rates. It says here every 3 years. Again, that's can be set at before this goes to council. And as it states there, we'd only charge customers with physical buildings. Vacant lots, parking lots, and parks would not be charged. There's a little example that we did in the prior presentation. Although I have gone through all the commercial accounts, schools and senior living facilities, and did the calculation. So based on those assumptions, here's what it would cost for the ambulance utility based on those different options. So under option 1, that is the charge based on our number of customers. So there is currently 3,760 chargeable customers within our database. There is the cost for those 4 additional employees. And then the charge per unit you can see would be, and there's the monthly charge. at $9.68 per customer per month. And then we had recommended a gradual phased in billing approach per month based on starting this in the beginning of July and then progressively increasing into the full rate by the January 1st of 2025. We believe that the current expense can absorb the differential over that time frame. The second one is the charge based on the residential equivalent unit. And you can see there's the number of accounts associated with it. And those, I didn't provide the detail of the calculations for all the 120 accounts involved in that. But this is how the numbers worked out based on that 1,985 square foot calculation. And you can see the number of units is considerably higher than the number of units under the first option. So just think of someone like, under the first scenario, someone like Walmart would get a $9.68 charge per month. Based on this scenario, you can see in the last page, I had the example. So, oh. You can see that Walmart has 205,690 square feet. That would have an ERU of 103.6. So they would be getting a monthly charge of $622, a yearly charge of close to $7,500. And then there's a couple other examples there. The high school has 102,087 square feet, representing an ERU of 51. And then that was just an example rate charge because I didn't have all the numbers calculated. And then, so the rate calculated under this method would be $6.68 per month. And you can see what the charges, the net charges would be for each one of those categories for the month, by month, and then for the total year, what the absorption of those costs would be. So the single family residence would absorb, $198,000 of the costs, the multifamily, 170, businesses, 34,000, schools, 11,300, churches, senior living facilities, and then the college. The last method you can see is based on the incident count, and you can see what the charges would be if we charged it based on those incident counts. And the incident count was driven from 2020 data that we had at the time. So that is the numbers that we've developed. The recommendation is that that we would like to take forward to council in a future council meeting would be to start the ambulance utility starting July 1st, 2022 at a 25% amount of that charge of $668, and then the allocation occurring towards option number 2, which is drive the charge based on residential equivalent unit.
All right, I'm going to go through council members for questions or wait, I'm sorry, Mr. Carlton, are you done?
Yes.
Okay, I've done that to you before, so it occurred to me that I better check. Okay, let's go through council members. Oh, wait, one more. Chief Winter, anything you wanted to add?
I need to have Brian do all of my presentations. He did such a good job.
Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Jessup, questions or comments?
Hi, Brian, I'm Paul. I've heard good things. Thank you for doing all this work and that kind of stuff. Again, my ignorance on this, so thank you for allowing me to ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that you you guys have decided the second option versus the third option, where if I understand correctly, customers who use the service pay for the service in general?
Well, of course, that level of incident count changes on, a daily, monthly basis. So one is that factors could change drastically depending on who absorbs the service. The reason we chose number 2 was because it's a more balanced, more citywide approach to funding it as opposed to hitting one group hard.
Sure, consistent. And then is it relevant to ask, and tell me if it's not, there's a 400 count increase this year. Do we know why? And do we suspect that's going to continue?
Chief, can you comment on that?
Oh, there's probably a lot of factors. All agencies in the valley took at least a 20% increase this year, and we're scrambling to determine that. In the month of January of this year, we're probably 20% above normal, but it has since slowed down over the last 3 or 4 days. Some of this is the new law enforcement requirements, where we go to a lot of calls that PD used to handle, we now take care of. Some of it is we have a really sick population at the moment, because either they have not gotten care timely, or because a lot of other factors. And so we're just seeing a lot more sick people than we have in years past. But our fire runs are also up. People are having more structure fires than are normal, and we probably doubled that last year over the year before.
Thank you so much for doing all that work. I have no further questions or comments.
Councilmember Cleveland.
Yeah, thanks again for the presentation, Brian, and your addition, Chief Winter. As far as the university is concerned, if I'm understanding this correctly, is when they're reaching the full rate, they'd be paying $1,300 a month. If I'm reading the chart correctly, is that accurate?
Yes, I still need to go through and verify some of the properties that we picked up. It's sometimes harder to determine based on the county websites exactly how many square foot the buildings are. So I think there's a bit of cleanup to do, but I think it's pretty close. So they're equivalent of 201 equivalent residential units. So yes, the charge for the university would be on a yearly basis, approximately 16,000 or $1,300 a month.
Have we received much feedback from them on kind of our considerations for this at this point?
This hasn't been communicated with anybody outside of staff and council.
Okay.
That's some public outreach that is definitely part of this process. And the schools are impacted, as well. So part of our process will be to inform them so they can incorporate this into their next year budget, and their budget cycle goes from June to June or July to July.
I will say this though, we have a meeting quarterly with the university leadership. The last quarter I did inform them that this was coming down the pike at some point because of the increased volumes. And then also I've been communicating Superintendent Fry as well about this situation. In fact, that's why when you see the proposal, we were basically having this cutting in third quarter, take into account how the schools do their budgeting at a different cycle than we do.
Mike, on that comment, can you remind me what percentage of land the university owns that they pay no property tax on?
That is Well, they just bought some additional ones. I would say probably around 16%.
16% of our property is non-taxable for the university.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of property that you would think is in private hands, but it's rented out, but they own it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Peterson?
Well, yeah, I guess I'd go back one question. I would suggest that your ambulance runs are up because of COVID patients. Is that correct?
Is a small factor. Surprisingly, we don't respond to very many COVID people anymore. We just have a really sick population that some of that might be because of COVID. They didn't go seek help or couldn't go seek help.
Sure,
and,
right.
And now that has escalated.
Yeah, as hospitals are on divert during this time, right? Yeah. Okay, so I think if I look at this, you have a title that says church. What is that all encompassing of all churches, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's all churches.
Yeah.
I mean, I could provide you guys a complete breakdown of the.
No, I still have some serious problems with the square footage for the college. We've got college. It's going to be 16,000 and north of that, and for limited number of ambulance runs, if I understand correctly. But meanwhile, we've grouped all churches. I mean, all schools are in that category. So those schools are being split, what, among 2, 3, 4 different schools? Churches, what, 4 or 5 different churches, perhaps?
Yes.
So there's a church there, probably on average is going to get $100 a month. I really, really would like to see something with the college, and I don't know. The problem with it is it gets into some crazy weighting system then again, where we now have an ERU adjusted for something else. But you would say that the college is probably based on all the empty buildings all over the campus that typically they have during a week. And when I say empty, I mean, you're talking about Smith Hall, you're talking about, Peterson Library, you're talking about dorms. So that's based on total square footage for the university?
Yeah, based on county tax records, who they identified as owning the property.
Yeah.
So it includes residential houses, apartments, any small businesses, buildings, commercial structures that they own.
Right, and all the classrooms, yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, and devil's advocate, since talking about, it is expensive, but they do not pay for any roads, any sidewalks, any lighting. They don't contribute to the community on those expenses. And yet they benefit from them.
Well, yeah.
Just discussion. That's all.
Right. I guess.
Food for thought.
Well, and also don't forget the number, that total unit charge per year, that's a fixed number. So whomever you don't charge, somebody else has to carry the burden of that. So if you reduce the college's amount, then who else is going to absorb that differential?
Well, yeah, but I guess that goes to my argument. You could reduce the college by, 1,000, and your top line there is going to go up by 50 cents. Less than 50 cents. Yeah. So I don't know. It just food for thought, I don't have an answer here. I know we need to come to a conclusion on this at some point, but it does seem that they're being, it's a way of getting to the end point here. But the problem is that they're being charged on a lot of buildings that are being probably underutilized most of the time, compared to residential, compared to schools and whatnot like that, the smaller schools. So anyway. Yeah.
Well, and I could meet with the college and go over their square footage and come up with a number that's maybe more representative. Maybe if that's something you need me to do, then
I'd like to input from the others too here, I guess, on the council, but it's one of these things where we've got, it's a situation where there needs to be some adjustment there, I think, when you're talking about one entity versus multiple entities there in the actual annual impact. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on that. Yeah.
All right, Councilmember Espinosa.
I'm just thinking about the whole situation. I'm leaning more towards Model 2 and Model 3. I think it's a good discussion, and I'll keep on thinking it over. Thank you.
Before I go to Councilmember Selby, Councilmember Cleveland has his hand raised.
Just a very quick thought. One thing about Model 3 is Brian was saying that it's based on incident count. I would worry that there would be pressure for people to not use the ambulance and be like, oh, well, maybe they'll probably be a fine. Let's wait another 20 minutes, see if they'll really be okay. And maybe people do that to some degree otherwise, but say for a business like the nursing homes, that's going to be a pretty substantial cost where they'd be bearing that. So I'd suspect there'd be a lot of unspoken and maybe even spoken pressure to don't call it for this person. Let's wait an hour, see if they get over it, because this has happened before and then they die. So just something to consider.
I also worry on that one that there's inequities to that because lower income people tend to be more sick because they have less access to medical care. So they tend to may need city help. Also, our senior citizens who are on fixed incomes, it would also be an added potential burden to them as well. That's what worries me about number 3. Ms. Selby.
No comments. I think you guys have covered it pretty well.
Ms. Sherman.
No questions, thanks.
Ms. Boyle.
So Chief Winter, what I heard you say is based off of these last 3 or 4 days, things have slowed down and maybe we don't need this. Totally kidding, totally kidding. No, I don't have any questions. This looks really good. I really like kind of how you've set up option number 2, some play there maybe with the college. And, we've talked before about how if we went with Model 2 and, for example, the college or something had a concern, they would have some time there to appeal it and maybe some wiggle room that we could make some adjustments. So I think that this looks really, really good. Thanks.
And then my last comment, I think, on that is the college does continue to buy up properties and take them off our tax rolls. So, they do have empty buildings or empty spots, but they're still adding more to their inventory of buildings and taking them all off our tax rolls. That's where I kind of struggle with their contributions to our budgets and our needs. That way is every year we're losing more and more money on our tax rolls as they pick up commercial and residential buildings. My last 2 cents. Any other comments on that? All right. So if there's no other items for good of the order, do we have a motion to adjourn? Councilmember Selby?
I do have one quick item, which is as of a couple days ago, I think all the paperwork is done. And so I am now Melody Williams. I'm still waiting on my driver's license, so it'll be a little bit until that gets through all the city paperwork, but I'm Melody Williams now.
Well, now I'm gonna have to call you Miss Williams. It took me long enough just to remember to call
you. You can just call me Melody. That's not changing.
Well,
with that, I would move we adjourn.
All right, well, congratulations on that. Is there a second?
I'll second Councilmember Cleveland.
All right, if there is no objections, then the meeting is adjourned at 7:48 p.m. Have a good night, everyone.